It's quite controversial.
According to Wikipedia, an invasive species is an introduced organism that becomes overpopulated and harms its new environment. Although most introduced species are neutral or beneficial with respect to other species, invasive species adversely affect habitats and bioregions, causing ecological, environmental, and/or economic damage.
It's a tricky field. Ecosystems are always in flux, whether it's environmental shifts or migration or the introduction of a new species. More importantly, it matters whether the species is labeled invasive or non-native invasive. The label depends on your perspective.
Non-native invasives occur in more than 100 lakes on Vancouver Island.
This is Elk Lake, the most fished lake in Region 1. It contains 11 different species of fish. 3 are native. I decided to make it my mission to find out where the rest of these fish came from. There was only one definite answer.
And so again, we actually know clearly when and where they were introduced. They're actually introduced by the province of BC. And we know for sure that the province of BC was only responsible for stocking in about 1930 5 or 6 heritage populations of smallmouth bass.
Smallmouth bass are amongst those fish labeled non-native invasive, as this lake has had a thriving ecosystem for many decades. Years ago, I saw something I'd never seen in this lake before: the common carp.
There, holy cow, look at that feller. Woo!
Where did these fish come from? How did they get here? Was it natural migration? I'm going to take you on my mission to find out when and how these fish found their way into Elk Lake. The first report I read was linked to the CRD website, the Hamera Report. Hamera briefly mentioned a report from 1958. They claimed the carp were introduced around 1900.
The story I heard was the carp were introduced to the lake thinking they were grass feeding carp, and they're not. They're garbage eaters.
Many people believe the CRD released the wrong type of carp to deal with a milfoid problem. My team of researchers discovered this article from 1976, published by the Daily Colonist. This article is important. It disproves historical points made in 1958 and clearly states that the introduction of carp was not approved by fisheries, CRD, or anyone. In 2019, I read an article. The article was about a controlled lab experiment in Brazil. A fish egg managed to make its way through the entire digestive system of a swan and was eventually hatched. Could this be how fish are finding their way into other ecosystems?
I suspect that it could be tested maybe in a lab that it could possibly occur, but these are all low probability events.
This next theory is exactly that, a theory that happens to fit the facts.
Okay, carp were introduced decades ago when bass fishermen were using them as bait to fish for bass. And a lot of them were just small goldfish.
So we had some high water years in Sprout Lake back in the 90s. The lake actually inundated a backyard pond that had some koi in it. Those koi, if left on their own, as you know, two colorful fish will spawn, and there's always some dark ones that are produced.
Yeah.
And those dark ones tend to survive in the wild better.
Yeah, goldfish are carp. Yeah.
Could anglers have deposited carp by using goldfish as bait? It's possible. Of Of course, there's always this theory as well. Now, the next question is, when did these fish find their way into the ecosystem?
Well, we really didn't see any type of carp. Like I say, we've been fishing constantly for the last 30 years, and I would say 5 years to 7 years max.
Okay.
I would say it was like 4 years ago-ish. Yeah.
Like,
When one was caught and it was on the dock
when was that?
3 years ago.
3 years ago?
The first report I read was the Hamera report, linked to the CRD website. I find myself back at the CRD website. I find another document, this one published in 1995, stating there were no carp in the lake in 1995. A complete contradiction. In 2014, the CRD completed upgrades to the Colquitt's River Dam. Inadvertently, this was the first non-angler documentation of carp in Elk Beaver Lake. Out of around 1,000 fish, 8 carp were found. I can say with confidence, sometime between 1995 and 2014, carp were introduced. In 2017, Hamera did an incredible job documenting current fish populations in Elk Beaver Lake. Hamera's fish sampling program sampled a total of 48 carp. Although the dam project wasn't an official study, it does give us a baseline for comparison, which is an increase of about 400%. These fish are now thriving in Elk Beaver Lake. Are these fish invasive or non-native invasive? I checked the BC Fishing Synopsis for more information, only to find out these fish are not in the BC Fishing Synopsis, and the only mention of the fish is a small mention under spearfishing. We cannot ascertain whether this fish is invasive or non-native invasive. It is a matter of perspective. My name's Eric, wishing everybody tight lines and no fines.